The cage. The galaxy had grown arrogant. For centuries, the so-called Galactic Council believed themselves the arbiters of civilization, keepers of peace, guardians of trade, and rulers over thousands of worlds. They had survived wars, plagues, and even star collapses, and in their minds, that gave them the right to judge. They studied humanity, catalogued its strange resilience, and concluded that Earth's people were simply another upstart species destined to be tamed. When the Council made its final ruling, their words echoed across every relay beacon and starlink. Humans are a death-world species. Dangerous. Unstable. For the safety of the galaxy, they shall be contained. Containment. That word was their polite veneer for caging. On barren moons and forgotten stations, human colonies were seized. Starships were boarded. Families were divided, their protests drowned out by the cold authority of alien tribunals. Children watched their parents dragged away in restraints forged for beasts. Soldiers who once defended Earth's allies found themselves disarmed, mocked, and locked behind shimmering energy fields. To the Council, it was mercy. To humanity, it was an open insult. The prison on Kar-Thus, 7. On the dead moon Kar-Thus, 7, one such cage stood as a symbol of alien dominion. It was not a prison of steel and iron but a labyrinth of force barriers and adaptive fields, designed to suppress human strength, dull their reflexes, and prevent even the thought of escape. Aliens came from across the stars to observe the dangerous animals in their pens. Scientists in crystal armor whispered notes into recorders. Soldiers laughed, tapping the glowing cages to watch humans recoil. Politicians used the prison as propaganda, proof of their power. Inside one enclosure sat Commander Elara Vey, her uniform stripped, her body scarred from both war and the indignities of captivity. She had fought in the Belt Rebellions, commanded a frigate at Orion's edge, and led her crew through the firestorms of Proxima's siege. Yet here, she was reduced to a specimen, a caged relic of humanity's arrogance. Still, her eyes burned. Other prisoners noticed. They had seen despair in their comrades, the slumped shoulders, the hollow eyes. But Elara was different. She studied the guards, memorized routines, and whispered words of steel into her fellow captives. "They think cages weaken us," she murmured one night as she traced patterns in the dust with her finger. "But cages only make predators hungrier." The mockery. One cycle, the prison was opened to visitors. A retinue of alien nobles arrived, their bodies draped in silk spun from nebula threads, their attendants carrying staves of living crystal. They gathered before Elara's pen, pointing and laughing. "Such fragile beings," one hissed in a tongue that reverberated like glass chimes. "They burned worlds, they say, yet look, caged with ease. Imagine the irony. They call themselves Deathworlders, yet here they sit, broken." Elara did not look away. She rose, slow and deliberate, and stepped to the very edge of her cage. "You laugh," she said, her voice carrying through the field. "But laughter fades. When it does, what remains is silence. And in that silence, you will remember my words. Cages do not hold Deathworlders. They forge them." The nobles hissed with amusement. One spat against the barrier. The crowd dispersed, leaving only guards with uneasy eyes. The first mistake. Far above Kar-Thus 7, in the cold halls of the Council, a signal was received. A distress beacon. Not from humans, but from aliens themselves. Entire colonies on the rim were reporting strange raids, ships appearing out of dark space, striking with terrifying precision, then vanishing without trace. The Council dismissed the reports at first. Pirates, perhaps. Rogue fleets. Yet as the signals grew, patterns emerged. The attackers weren't pirates, they were organized, coordinated, and merciless. Worse still, their battle banners bore a symbol the Council had hoped never to see again, the fractured star of humanity. At first, the Council scoffed. "Impossible," they said. "The humans are caged. Their fleets dismantled. Their admirals imprisoned." But the distress calls multiplied. Entire sectors went dark. Alien patrols found wreckage drifting in the void, torn apart with brutal efficiency. Survivors spoke of ships that moved like predators, fangs of metal, engines that roared like storms. The council convened, their crystal spires humming with panic. The verdict was clear: send reinforcements, strengthen the cages, and wait for the attacks to burn themselves out. But then came the SOS from Carthus 7. The cage shatters. It began with tremors. Subtle at first, barely enough to stir the dust across the prison floor. Guards whispered, sensors flickered, but no one acted. Then the sky cracked. From the heavens descended ships the prisoners recognized at once. Not fragile council cruisers. Not ornate alien carriers. These were brutal, angular, unmistakably human warships, rebuilt, reforged, and more monstrous than before. Their hulls bore scars of exile, their cannons burned with a cold blue fire, and their banners carried the fury of an entire species. The Deathworlder fleet had come. Inside the cages, the barriers flickered. Alarms shrieked in alien tongues. Guards scrambled, shouting into comms, but their words dissolved into static. The human prisoners looked at each other with wide, disbelieving eyes. Ilara smiled. "You hear that?" she whispered. "That's not a rescue. That's wrath." The barriers died with a sound like shattering glass. Ilara stepped free. Her fists clenched. Her soldiers, once broken, rose beside her. They were not weak. They were waiting. And above them, as alien defenses crumbled under the bombardment of Deathworlder cannons, one truth spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The humans had not been contained. They had been caged. And now the cage was broken. The Council's horror. In their crystal chambers, the counselors stared at the data feeds. Shipyards in flames. Border worlds collapsing. Armadas torn apart in minutes. "Impossible," one stammered. They were scattered. They were broken. They were gone. But the truth was undeniable. The humans had endured, hidden, and rebuilt. In exile, they had sharpened their claws. In silence, they had studied alien fleets, memorized their weaknesses, and forged weapons the galaxy had never dreamed of. And now, answering the SOS that was never meant for them, the Deathworlders had arrived. Not as prisoners. Not as exiles. But as predators. Ilara's oath. As fire rained upon Carthus 7, Ilara stood on the shattered ramparts of the prison. Around her, humans tore weapons from dead guards and raised them high. Above, the fleet's guns silenced alien resistance in brutal cascades of light. Ilara lifted her hand, bloodied and unbroken, toward the descending warships. "They thought us fragile," she said, her voice echoing across the ruins. "They thought cages would hold us. But we are Deathworlders. We were forged in storms, tempered in fire. And now," she pointed toward the stars, where the enemy fled. "Now the galaxy will remember our fury." The humans roared, their voices shaking the prison walls. And far above, the Deathworlder fleet answered with a thunder that shook the heavens. The wrath of Deathworlders. The galaxy had underestimated humanity once. It would not survive doing so again. The fleet's descent. From Carthus 7 to the farthest rim colonies, the Deathworlder fleet moved like a shadow consuming starlight. Reports came in across council sectors faster than they could be silenced. Patrol groups annihilated in ambushes, supply convoys reduced to drifting wreckage, colonies scorched into silence. But it wasn't only fire and ruin. Humanity was methodical. Where alien fleets shattered, human ships sifted through the wreckage, pulling survivors into cages of their own making. Whole populations were relocated, no longer prisoners of the Council, but captives of Deathworlders who had long memories and no mercy. The galaxy had thought humans beasts. And beasts knew only instinct. But humans, as the Council now learned with growing terror, were predators with strategy. The Council fractures. In the crystal spire of Cartel, the Council convened. The chamber was normally a place of arrogance, glittering silks, echoing voices, debates laced with condescension. Now, the air was thick with fear. Their fleet moves with impossible speed, hissed the Threxian delegate, his insectoid mandibles clattering nervously. They strike without warning, croaked the amphibious Sorin, slime dripping onto his crystal robes. How do they navigate dark space so effortlessly? We caged them, a reptilian counselor spat, his scales pale with unease. We dismantled their navies. From the shadows, a voice like fractured glass answered. You caged the body, not the will. The room turned. The speaker was an older Valen scholar, one of the few who had ever studied Earth deeply. His eyes glowed with crystalline implants as he projected an image into the chamber, a map of human strikes. They adapt. They learn. You gave them centuries of humiliation, of captivity, of exile. And in silence, they sharpened themselves. His voice dropped lower. Now, you are witnessing the result. The counselors erupted into argument, pleas for retreat, demands for extermination, suggestions of negotiation. But the truth sat heavy in every word. No one knew how to stop the Deathworlders. Ilara's liberation. On Karthus, 7, Commander Ilara Vey strode through the ruins of the once proud prison complex. The alien banners were torn down, trampled under human boots. Former captives now marched in disciplined ranks, wearing scavenged armor and carrying alien weapons reconfigured to their deadly advantage. Ilara herself wore no armor. Only the scorched remains of her human uniform, a symbol that humanity's spirit had never been broken. At her side walked survivors who had once been mere shadows in cages, soldiers, scientists, civilians, all now bound by vengeance. A transmission from the fleet commander crackled through her comms. Commander Vey. The council fleets are regrouping near the Veyron belt. We intend to make an example. Ilara's lips curved into a grim smile. Then let's remind them what Deathworlders are capable of. The Battle of Veyron Belt. The Council believed the Veyron Belt, a dense stretch of asteroids orbiting a dying star, would be their salvation. The environment was hostile, navigation nearly impossible. Surely even Deathworlders could not wage war amidst such chaos. They were wrong. When the human fleet arrived, their ships slipped into the asteroid fields like hunters into tall grass. Council vessels struggled, their elegant hulls torn by rock collisions, their shields drained by the constant impacts. Human dreadnoughts, scarred and brutal, adapted instantly, using asteroids as cover, redirecting enemy fire into collisions, turning the field itself into a weapon. The battle was not fought in minutes, but in heartbeats. Council ships vanished one by one, torn apart by railgun fire that lit the void like lightning. Human strike craft darted through asteroid shadows, planting charges that ripped cruisers in half. And at the center, the flagship Iron Revenant loomed, a beast of steel, its cannons thundering with relentless fury. Inside, the Deathworlder admiral gave a single command that echoed across every channel. Leave no ship unbroken. By the end, the Veyron Belt was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The message. After the slaughter, the Deathworlders broadcast across the galactic network. The transmission was raw, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. Every species, from the smallest colony to the Council's highest spire, saw it. On screen stood Commander Ilara Vey, her face streaked with blood and firelight. Behind her, human soldiers raised banners amidst alien wreckage. You thought cages would hold us, she began, her voice steady, cold as steel. You thought humiliation would break us. Instead, you taught us patience. You gave us time. And time is the sharpest weapon of all. She leaned forward, her eyes burning into the galaxy itself. You call us Deathworlders. That name was meant as a warning. You should have listened. The screen shifted, images of shattered fleets, burning colonies, and alien generals kneeling in defeat. This is not conquest, Ilara continued. This is justice. You took our freedom. You mocked our strength. Now we take back what is ours, and more. Every world that stood by, every hand that turned our cages closed, will feel the weight of our fury. The transmission ended with the fractured star of humanity, glowing crimson. The panic spreads. Entire sectors fell into chaos. Alien civilians fled core worlds, believing the Deathworlders would arrive at any moment. Armies deserted their posts, their commanders unwilling to face the predators unleashed. Even council allies whispered betrayal. Why fight for rulers who could not protect themselves? Whispers spread in markets, taverns, and back alleys. They are not human anymore. They are something more. Deathworlders don't die. They wait. The galaxy caged monsters. Now the monsters are free. The last stand of Cartel. The Council, desperate, rallied its grand fleet at Cartel itself, the shining jewel of their empire, a world encased in crystal spires and shielded by the strongest armadas ever built. As the Deathworlder fleet approached, alien propaganda blared across the system. They cannot breach us. We are united. We are eternal. But when the human ships emerged from dark space, silence swept the stars. The fleet was vast, larger than any alien intelligence had predicted. Dreadnoughts with hulls like mountains, carriers swarming with strike craft, destroyers cloaked in shadow and flame. Their engines glowed like suns. Their weapons hummed with the cold promise of extinction. The battle was not a clash. It was a massacre. Alien fleets fired in desperation, beams lancing into the void, but human ships absorbed the fire and returned it tenfold. Cannons tore through shields as if they were paper. Carriers vomited swarms of gunships that shredded defense lines. The crystal spires of Cartel cracked, shattered, and fell into dust. At the heart of the destruction, the Iron Revenant loomed above the council chambers. Elara stood at the observation deck, watching the city below burn with a grim expression. Her crew waited for her word. "Do we finish them?" one asked. Elara's jaw clenched. She thought of the cages, the laughter, the children who grew up in captivity. Then she spoke. "No. We leave them alive. Let them live with what they created. Fear will be their cage now." The silence that followed. When the cannons ceased, the galaxy trembled. The council was broken. Its fleet scattered, its leaders dead or fleeing. And across the void, one message spread like wildfire. The Deathworlders have returned. Alien worlds that once mocked humanity now trembled in silence. None dared send another SOS. None dared challenge the wrath they had unleashed. For where once humanity had been caged, now it walked free, and the galaxy itself would never forget the sound of those cages shattering. Elara's oath fulfilled. In the aftermath, Elara Vey stood once more before her people. No longer prisoners, no longer outcasts. They were Deathworlders reborn. She raised her hand, not in command, but in promise. "We were forged in chains," she said, her voice echoing through the stars. "But chains break. And when they do, those who forged them will regret ever hearing the name of humanity." The fleet roared approval, their engines igniting as one. And with that, the Deathworlders vanished back into the dark, leaving behind only ruins, silence, and fear.